Romans chapter 10, starting at verse 9. Because if you confess with your lips the Lord Yeshua and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For one believes with the heart and so is justified, and one confesses with the mouth and so is saved. Confesses what? Believes what? That the Lord Yeshua was raised by God from the dead. The Lord Yeshua was dead. 11. The scripture says, no one who believes in him will be put to shame. For there is no distinction between Jew and Greek. The same Lord is Lord of all and is generous to all who call on him. Call on who? The Lord Yeshua. Verse 13. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Which one is he talking about? The Lord Yeshua, as in verse 9. But how are they to call on one in whom they have not believed? Believed in who? The Lord Yeshua. And how are they to believe in one of whom they have never heard? Well, obviously they heard about Yehovah, but they have not heard about the Lord Yeshua, who these apostles are presenting to the world. And how are they to hear without someone to proclaim him? Proclaim who? The Lord Yeshua, and that God raised him from the dead. Verse 15. And how are they to proclaim him unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. But not all have obeyed the good news, for Isaiah says, Lord, who has believed our message? So faith comes from what is heard, and what is heard comes through the word of Messiah, aka Lord Yeshua. So notice how verse 10, verse 12, and verse 13 starts out with for. So verse 13 is a quote from the Old Testament. Then where in the Old Testament is the quote of verse 12 and verse 10? For verse 10 and verse 12 also say for. Notice he notifies you when he quotes something, and that is, as the scripture says, as it is written. For Isaiah says, but he doesn't say none of this for verse 13. Just because you can find these kind of words in the Old Testament does not mean that he is quoting the Old Testament. The Lord that he is referring to, that you got to call on his name, is the Lord Yeshua, as in verse 9. Nothing here about him quoting the Old Testament.